there's theories about how this was made, but it appears to be a radiant image. It's consistent throughout the whole shroud, exactly the same thickness, about like a soap bubble, or the protective anti-glare on your glasses. It's extremely thin, and it doesn't respond to oxidation and things. There's something about this image that is all the way across, uniform, and independent of what we would expect from anything that was sort of a dye or whatever. So the question is, what created this? Now, you know what image that is? That's from Hiroshima, where the flash of the atomic bomb put the shadow of someone that it vaporized. So this is very different than the image on the shroud, but still it gives us the vaguest sense of comparison. So what created it? Uniform color, same intensity all across, stable to water, heat, insoluble to acids. Now the frontal and dorsal views are of equal intensity. You would have expected laying down on this to create a different image than that which was loosely covering the top, but it isn't. It's exactly the same. And a negative image of the body produces a photographic quality photo. Not only just photographic, but it actually gives us three-dimensional data so that NASA can build a picture. This shouldn't happen with a photograph. Okay. Now, this is a very interesting discovery. Not only is there an image on the front of it, but on the back side of the shroud, the exact same image is there, only much fainter. So if you put a needle through the eye on the front, it goes through and it's exactly the same thing on the other side. So how did the image do this? And furthermore, nothing goes through. So the image is the soap bubble thinness on both sides of the shroud with nothing going through, and it's in perfect correspondence. That's a real puzzle. Now, presumably light of some kind or energy could do that, but there is one other alternative that's been suggested. Pliny the Elder. There are brown coloring of the images that appears to have starch fractions and saccharides. Now, this is an important detail because Pliny, from 23 to 79 AD, who, by the way, died of smoke inhalation rescuing people from Mount Vesuvius. Quite a leader, a military leader and a scientist. He discovered melanoidins after the body. This is used in beer. It turns beer brown, hops and all, or toast. After a body has died and starts to let off proteins, if these proteins connected with starch that was there, it would form this brown. Well, what was starch doing on the shroud? Pliny tells us that flax was in the 1st century, when they were trying to make it spin faster, they put starch on it. And after they got the thing woven, they washed it out and let it dry in the sun. So one speculation is it dried with a heavier starch film on the part that was exposed to the sun and less on the other side. So when the gases from the body began to go through, they didn't do anything to the middle section because there wasn't the starch there. It's interesting, but I'm not sure it's as good as the one that has to do with the light. But it just shows how many ways you can try to explain something that is a kind of a real puzzle. Here's the three-dimensional part that they get from this, which shouldn't be. Now, in the blue, no one expected to find coins over the eyes, because that wasn't something that was done that often, although it was done among Jewish burial. But here you see magnifications of one of the people that studied this. It's not just imagining things. It's very clear that you can find on coins minted by Pontius Pilate aspects of the coins over the eyes of the shroud. And one of the other interesting things is that they found a misprint. They used a C instead of a kappa. They found it. And there wasn't a coin extant at the time with this, and they found one after having discovered this. So that's another interesting detail. Coins of Pontius Pilate would have been printed in Greek letters using a kappa, and at the time of this discovery there was no lepton with a C. So if this had been pareidolia, where you see what you want to see, they wouldn't have been looking for C. Now, there are 74 points of congruence with a coin. This is a litus, which could easily be thought of as almost a staff, which I find very ironic. They found a coin with a staff and put it over the eyes. One was a coin in honor of his Pilate's wife. And since y'all were good on my first coin, I'm going to let you hold a 2,000-year-old coin, which is my favorite of all. This is a lepton minted by Pontius Pilate, and they only were for about 6 years. So this is another extraordinary thing, that the man in the shroud that Pontius Pilate coins on his eyes that date what went on to the time of Pilate.
Is that the same type of coin that was on his eyes?
That's it. That is it. That is the real deal. That's 2,000 years old, getting more valuable by the year. Now, this is travertine aragonite, a very interesting limestone. Interesting because this limestone is not known anywhere in the world except the old city burial site in Jerusalem. And guess what's found on the feet area of the shroud and on the shroud? This. So the dust of this rock is singing for us a hallelujah, and it's an exact match. Now look how unique pollen grains are. You can't miss them, which one goes with which. They're kind of like those dust mites on us, if we could see them, because each one of those are absolutely unique, terrifying creatures that are crawling all over us right now. There are 58 different pollens on the shroud, and they date it to the Dead Sea, or they locate it geographically to the Dead Sea, the Negev Desert, the Anatolian steppes of central and western Turkey, Edessa, Constantinople, and Western Europe. It's a virtual chronology of exactly where the shroud's been for 2,000 years. Several of these species are even more interesting because they tell us some very specific things. This one only blooms between March and May. It's a good temporal indicator. And it is a widespread Mediterranean species, but it doesn't locate it specifically to Jerusalem, but it tells us the months that it was open. Oh, all right, this is a detour. What is that? Let me help you. Now what is it? Oh, you all are easy. And now what is it? It's getting more and more familiar, isn't it, in the circle? And look, there's his ear, there's his leg, there's his tail, there's his, oh, that's another ear. But it isn't a rat, it's just a rock. But we see what we want to see. And this is pareidolia. What do you see in the middle here? All right, somebody sees an angel. What else do you see? Cross. You know that this is the Rorschach test. Right. Yes. I'm trying to be tricky here because I think it's very hard to find either one of those in there.
Yeah,
Now look.
I see little faces.
All right, okay, now look what happened. That's what you see. Someone has found flowers, and what they think is that the flowers were put on there and they left an imprint. But some people say, well, maybe it's pareidolia, but I think we can see some difference. In any case, it's up here, and look at this icon. Somebody studied the shroud real well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, historically, the epitaph.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Let's see here. All right, now, this one, Cistus creticus are found on the surface. It's a highly specific geographic indicator. It only grows as far as the old city of Jerusalem in higher elevations. So we're getting very close now. And this one's the most important of all. It begins to open midday, gradually until opened at sunset. And precisely the buds open from 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and only during that time. Yeah, that makes my hair stand up, because it's pinpointing a moment in time that the shroud would have had to have been exposed to the air, and it was right when the Gospels say that Jesus died and was removed from the cross. Now, they also found oak in the back of the head, where the patibulum would have been, and oak was the very common tree, perhaps the most common tree in Palestine at that time. Crucifixion was horrible. Cicero said you couldn't do that to a Roman citizen, and when you read what he's saying, upstanding, wealthy, privileged Roman, you can get a sense that we lose of how utterly shameful and horrible the cross was. Walking naked through the city to be humiliated as an enemy of Rome that would never dare stand against the Roman Empire. And this is what Caiaphas and the leaders of Judaism at the time wanted done, because they wanted to crush any possibility that he could be seen as anything. Utterly shameful. Now, John Calvin, roll over. Here is another witness. How many of you heard of sudarium? You've heard of the napkin, right? Because that's how it's translated in English.
Right.
That's the sudarium. That's the word in the Greek. The sudarium is a cloth that we know its history very well. It's been in Spain for 1,400 years, and it went from Jerusalem to Alexandria and then to Spain. The sudarium, the writer of the life of St. Nino of Georgia, the real Georgia, not where I live, who died in 338 AD, mentions that Apostle Peter hid the sudarium. Isodot of Merv in 850 says in the commentaries on the Gospels in Syriac, that was based on early Eastern traditions, says that the burial linens were given to Joseph of Arimathea, while Peter took the sudarium, and when he laid hands on someone, he put it on his head, and this led to the tradition of bishops putting cloths around their heads and around their necks. It may even be part of the square. It's hard to say where our vestments come from, but they could well be related to the ancient memory of this. In a manuscript known as San Antonino Martyr, St. Anthony the Martyr, there's a pilgrimage chronicle to the Holy Land in 570 AD, and the author says that there was a cave close to the monastery of St. Mark on the other side of the River Jordan, where 7 nuns lived in 7 cells, and they looked after the sudarium. So there was a memory of this in the history of the church. The sudarium is very interesting. Here's its history. And it's rarely brought out. You don't hear much about the sudarium because they don't bring this out much. It's been in the Catholic Church for a long time. Palestinian oak is on it. This is where it's kept. This is what it looks like. It's a rough cloth, not at all like the expensive twill of the Syriac. And what they're used for is to put over the face of the dead when they die on the cross. This is the blood. There's a lot of blood flow and protein albumin on this, which gives all kinds of information. Somebody put their hand over the nose after he died to staunch the blood and the plasma coming out of the nose, because this had to be staunched, because if it went on the ground or anywhere, it would be, a loss, a defilement. So they immediately tried to to contain this. But, as we're going to see in a minute, they were running out of time. And since he died a death on the cross, it was not supposed to be clean. So these were very good, obedient Jews, and they would have been under a problem trying to obey the law. So, you can reconstruct exactly what happened forensically. This is what it would have looked like. It would have been placed over the head. And when you look exactly, you can see when the head was up, the blood flowed a certain way. When they took him pulled the stake out, and he's laying down with, still on the patibulum, because they haven't pulled the nails out, and you're talking about 300 and some pounds, it was not easy to handle. The blood flows up over the head. Thank you. So this lets them know exactly how long he was in these positions and how long it took them to unnail him. And we can compare this then to what's in the Gospels. There was blood and pulmonary edema confirming 6-to-1, pulmonary edema to blood, confirming that he was asphyxiated. His heart stopped. Most, I would say, what you see in these icons of Christ on the cross with the spear over here are wrong. I don't know why traditionally that occurred. They would have stuck the lance in this side to pierce the pericardium sac, and blood and water would have flowed out, exactly like St. John said. Of course, the water was the pulmonary edema. This is what we reconstruct how the face was, the bruising and blood from the patibulum. The person in both the shroud and the sudarium has AB blood type. It's very rare, although among Semites, Jewish people, it's about 18% of the population. For the rest, it's about 2%, 2 to 3. So we have that, and whoops, let me see here. Examination shows that the man's knees were bruised and scabbed over, his face was smashed in, and both are congruent with what would have happened by carrying a shroud. All right, what happened here? I'm stuck.
So
All right.
This sudarium exists in northern Spain?
Yes, yes. It was in there were several other relics with it. I don't know if they still exist now, but this is kept there. And so what now happens is the shroud doesn't exist alone. It's blood, pollen, everything syncs up, and the face is the same face as the man in the shroud. The nose is exact same length. The whole thing, it was over that face. And it was set aside in the tomb by itself, and he was put in a fresh linen cloth, and they didn't have time to finish. They had to come back because Passover and the sun was setting. All right,
So the
let's see.
sudarium was first, you're saying, and
The
then?
sudarium was put on when he was on the cross.
Okay.
After they brought him down, pulled the nails out, and Joseph brought back 100 pounds of myrrh and aloe, which they had to try to immediately contain all the blood, and they didn't wash him. So the shroud has dirt, aloe, myrrh, all this is still part of it. And they put him in there. So, get a little ahead of myself, but I guess I better finish up here. I got to get to the astronomy, because you got to see this. We had a blood moon recently. A blood moon is when you get a 20% eclipse, and the moon looks red from the earth. Now, the gospel writers differ as to the actual date of the crucifixion of Jesus. The synoptics say it occurred on Passover. Apostle John dates it on the crucifixion on the 14th day of Nisan. This is Friday, the day before the Passover. This is the day the Passover lambs would have been sacrificed. So, how can we find out which one was right? Well, modern astronomy helps. It adds a third witness to the crucifixion. According to the observations, there are only 2 possible dates on which the 14th of Nisan is on a Friday that would have occurred during Pontius Pilate's reign, and they are April 7th, 30 AD, and April 3rd, 33 AD. Now, how do we differentiate which one's which? Well, only one of those 2 has a partial eclipse of the moon, which would be seen from Jerusalem just before Passover begins with the setting of the sun. And that would have been April 3rd, 33 AD at 6:20 p.m., and it would have lasted to 6:50 p.m. in the afternoon. I'll skip some of the dating of that, but that makes a whole lot of sense. And so the only real acceptable date would be that, according to the Julian calendar. So what we have is a chronology now, based on forensics that corresponds to the gospel. 12 noon crucifixion, he dies at 3 p.m., he dies fast. He was exhausted, dehydrated, nearly beat to death, and unlike other people who were put there and had to have their legs broken, he didn't, because he died rather quickly. He was on one of the taller crosses, which means the dogs couldn't chew on him. So it's a little bit better. It's a step up in the shame thing. So 3 p.m., okay, he dies. We know this from the sudarium, that his body hung on a cross, and Joseph would have had to get permission from Pilate to remove it. The blood flow concentrations reveal how long he was there upright. And then he was removed at 5 p.m. and laid on the ground, still attached to the patibulum, for about an hour. 6:20 to 6:50, the moon turned red, which would be seen from Jerusalem. And they had 10 minutes from 6:50 to 7 to carry him from Golgotha to the tomb. Now, the patibulum is 110 pounds, and he weighs 180. That's pretty heavy. And if you put 100 pounds of myrrh in there too, it would have taken Joseph, John, we don't know who else, to get him to the tomb. So, where was Peter when the moon turned red and Jesus was dead? Peter, remember the prophecy of Joel, the moon turned to blood. Peter was somewhere having to decide if he trusted the word that Christ had told him ahead of time, which is, "You've never really gotten it, Peter. I know you would fight for me like a soldier with your sword, and I know you believe that you would never desert me, but you need to know that you will. That like every other man who's ever lived, every woman, every human being, from the beginning of time to the end, you are not capable of doing what I am calling you to, out of your own egocentric, anthropocentric, human power. And it's going to be a painful lesson, and you're going to learn it and find out when the cock crows that you will do exactly opposite of what you're saying right now. But I want you to remember when you do this, that I love you, and I already know this. So it doesn't change anything about our relationship. In fact, it's your last test for this course. You have to discover your own nothingness. And when you are betrayed your commander-in-chief, and you're a deserter, and you are so ashamed for betraying all of your company and abandoning the entire fight, and you want to fall on your sword and die, don't do it. Remember what I'm telling you now, and when you've seen what I need you to see, get up and come home and strengthen the brethren, because what I need are priests who recognize their nothingness. Priests who do not try to stick Christianity on to an anthropocentric foundation, and with zeal and reason and all of human powers make a Superman. Just take Jesus and apply it to my humanity, and I'm man on steroids. I need you to see that you are utterly empty of the possibility of this. And from that position, strengthen the company. Serve. This is extraordinary, and if we had another day to talk, we could look at what it is for combat veterans and others who have faced horrific decisions that have a moral injury and a wound in their heart that they cannot make go away on their own. They cannot forgive themselves, and they never will be able to. They will always be exiles unless they find what Peter found, which is to trust the love of God in Christ to forgive when I cannot on my own do it myself. And if I refuse and think, I've got to maintain control, If I had done something else, I could have saved that man from dying. I could have done it. I could have. No, I couldn't. Because I'm basically a helpless human being. And unless I rely on God, as every addict learns who gets into recovery, I will live in exile forever, as Adam and Eve would. But fortunately, Peter, Moses in Midian for 40 years, Jacob wrestling with an angel, our heroes are the strugglers who are called into something that they face that's so big that they discover the limits of human strength. And this calls down the milk of grace like a mother, like a child's helplessness calls the mother's milk when it's hungry. And without that cry, God can't feed us because we're still trying to do it ourselves. Time is up. Is that what that wave is?
No. I was
No.
waving to somebody walking in.
Okay. All right. That's a reminder. I'm sensitive. 8:13. Way past my privilege. That's not actually where he was laid. That's the marble on top to stop the looters. It was underneath that marble. Passover's at 7:15, so you realize they could not be, they had to get in there and they couldn't have finished. So they came back, and Simon Peter was back now. He's back on the scene. But guess what? He wasn't there when they put him in the tomb. John was. And John saw what the tomb looked like before, when they put him in there. And when he came back, he saw that the sudarium, the napkin, was exactly where it was. And guess what he saw on the slab? How many of you get out of bed in the morning by passing through the covers? I don't think anybody does. So when he looks in there, he didn't see him roll them away and step out. And it settled down, and there was a full-length image on both sides. And he looked in, and he believed something that was incomprehensible. Peter was still disoriented. He couldn't get it. But he was lacking some information, too, about that. Sown a natural body, raised a spiritual one. He not only puffed through that, but what did he do with the walls in the upper room? And where was he? 40 people are seeing him over here, 500 over here. He's appearing to Mary Magdalene, who thinks he's the gardener. And Cleopas and Luke on the road. And guess what's common among all of them? They don't know who he is. What are we being told in the Gospels before and after the resurrection? We're being told that there's no human being on earth who can find Jesus Christ by reason, science, the five senses, or any other human power. We will never go from fact to faith. But noetically, if the uncreated God comes to humanity and assumes it, then, as St. Maximus says, a natural faculty exists which can be communicated with noetically. And the heart then communicates what is just given noetically to the rest of the body. But it can't do it on its own. And we have the testimony of the apostles that even though they lived with Jesus, they ate with him, they heard his teaching, they were closer to him than any of us have been in a human way. It did not allow them to get what he was saying. They only got it noetically. This ought to give us some pretty serious reason to think about what's in the Philokalia and what it means that our salvation is a daily struggle to find a depth of inner silence, wakefulness, where we attend to the mystery of the thatness of the world, behind which is the invisible presence of Christ that comes to us that way and is on the other side of each person in this room, so that basically Jesus is saying, Stephen, let me introduce to you Anne. Can you find room in yourself and in the world you know to include her? Because I have something I want to show you of myself that you will never know in any other way unless you encounter Anne. If I say, I don't know, Anne's a bit odd. He'll say, oh, oy vey, I'm sorry. It means that you refuse me, and you will miss this part. I still love you, but there's no other way I can give you this. So with each person, we have a confrontation with Christ, who is inviting us into a larger life. And this is all invisible to the naked eye, only visible to the heart that warms at the altar of the heart of the other, which is an invocation, an epiklesis, just as at the divine altar, for the noetic illumination of Christ, who makes the bread become wine and turns us into the theophany of Emmaus. Glory to thee, O Lord, who went to hell and was raised from the dead for us. And Christ is in our midst.
So it shall be.
Okay. I was over my time, so now I don't know if you have any questions. But
2 minutes left for questions.
2 minutes question. All right. Anybody have one? Yes, sir.
The coin of Pontius Pilate, was that the same coin that was put over Jesus' eye?
It's the same type, but it's not the one that was over his eyes. I don't know where that would be, because all they have is the image of that coin in the shroud. But because this coin exists, there are other coins around that were minted by him. And so, I don't know who may have handled that coin, though. One of the apostles may have had it. We don't know. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I was reading that the myrrh and the spices and the aloe and stuff kind of acted like a glue with the cloth. So was the cloth,
Would have been sticky and all that.
was it like molded? Or did they get it?
It's totally flexible now. Whatever was there is long gone. This, I put aloe and myrrh all over my face and stuck it on here, but you can't see anything because it's just a blob, which just shows it's a lot harder than you think to make something like that. So, if it was a forgery, it's a miracle. So, yeah, that would have likely vanished pretty quickly, but it may have been a gooey mess at the time. I don't know. Although, they didn't have it 10 minutes. So it may well be that they simply spread this out, laid it down, folded it over, and they didn't wrap it. And they came back to add spices. So we don't know actually how much they even got on there. They could have had 100 pounds and didn't put it on. We don't know.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you've thought about this or looked into it or something, because in St. John's Gospel he says that the darkness falls between the 6th and the 9th hour, which would have started at 3 o'clock and gone on until 6 o'clock, I think. Is that right?
Sorry, 12 till 3.
12 till 3?
12 till 3, yeah.
6 to the 9th hour.
The darkness is different than the eclipse.
Okay, that was my question. Are you trying to say that the darkness that fell was the eclipse?
The darkness is an unknown. I don't know what to say, or about earthquakes.
But there was a historical account from somebody in Josephus' time.
Is that right?
That said there was dark, that
Well, I'd like to say
Right. But my question was particularly about the eclipse. You're not trying to say that the eclipse was the dark.
No.
Okay.
No, that's different.
and that is a prophecy in the Old Testament about the sun going down at the middle of the day. And then there's a correlative in the early historians that actually said that at some point in around, the time of Christ, the sun did go down, and he wondered what was going on, and then he found out later on, kind of a post.
I'll have to look at that. I'm not familiar with that.
It's interesting.
Plus the 6th hour at noon is traditionally when Eve was tempted and they fell.
And the lamb was also slaughtered in the temple. And I was thinking about this the other day, we were reading in the Trinitarian, but God created man on the 6th day, and he also recreated man on the 6th day as well. And he rested on the 7th day in both cases. So,
Yes, and I think about that 7th day, that after God spoke the world into being, he then listened. And this was the first liturgy. And in the listening, the absence of God's creative action, I think we see a foretaste of the abandonment of Christ by God. So that there is the Deus absconditus, there's the Sabbath is not just, and it is good, what was good was not just creation. What was also good is the lifting and the resurrection of humanity, which comes from the willingness of God's love to lay his life down, which, as Father Lev Gillette says, there was a cross in the heart of God before creation. When God made the world and then he looked upon it and said, it's very good, I think he was talking about something more than creation. He's also talking about this paradoxical gift, which is what God offers from himself through the Son. All is created through the Word, through the Logos. All is recreated through the Logos. This is the reason we're not robots or addicts. If God refused to go to hell and suffer everything we go through in our developmental immaturity spiritually, we would not have the possibility of becoming persons, because persons must be free. So that means God knew when he created us that he would suffer terribly in order to make it possible for us to willingly accept the invitation to receive the divine life. This would be traumatic to God to give his life, and it will be traumatic to us to receive it. That trauma is experienced, a taste of it, in everyone who must forgive parents for hurting us, abusing us, for injustices that come that we didn't ask for. We are faced with the question that Christ had to face with us, which is, will I forgive them when it wasn't my fault at all? It was totally unjust, wrong. Christ says this is part of passion bearing. And if it were to be changed and I were to stop it, I would make the world a machine. So what I'm offering you is something that is indeed traumatic, but there's life after the trauma. There's life after the betrayal. And it is something that is so great that this is nothing compared to what you receive. A woman has travail and birth, but it's nothing compared to the life she gives. So the asceticism, this is so often underestimated too. It's a certain parallel, but the asceticism and the hesychasm of the mother, who learned very early all discomfort, all personal inconvenience, every single thing one would escape if one could, is willingly deceived. Don't even have to forgive, because of the life that is being carried. This is what we hope later to do in life with other things. Asceticism is about being a life bearer. What life? We're pregnant with the divine life. Am I willing to enter into ascetical discomfort in order to bear Christ? To enter into passion bearing for Christ? It happens in our ordinary life. It's not that we have to go somewhere to Mars to do it. Or even Mount Athos, if we can, fine. But our Mount Athos our cave is right here. And every thought we have and every choice we make is the painting we're making. It's the book we're writing with our life. We are the book, and God will open the book at the last moment of our life. And our entire life, every word, thought, everything is there. You can't hide from anything. It's all there. God will read it with love. And it will break our heart. Anything that we have yet to bring before Him. But what He reads, we'll see things that we haven't even got eyes to see right now. And so all the pain of this life will be gone in a flash. And then there will be an eternal liturgy, a call and response, where instead of Adam and Eve and Anne, where are you? It will be, here I am. The I am who I am will call, and we will ring with the reflection of Him when we say, here I am. And the kenosis of Christ will, like in the perichoresis of the Trinity, will empty out into us, I am yours, do with me whatever you want. And we will answer back, I am yours, do with me whatever you want. And we will discover what marriage is. Marriage is the Holy Trinity. And marriage is the kenotic self-offering to the other in the eternal liturgy. And this we will say later, because right now what happens is, he says, I'm yours, do with me whatever you want. And we say instead of, we say, yeah! And we run off and grab the apple and the person, and we say, I want what you give me, but I don't want you, because I'm so excited about what you're giving me. And you can see that I'm getting to a sort of static and non-enthusiastic craziness. It's loco weed. This is the voluptuous choice, as Clement of Alexandria speaks of. And we must learn that the voluptuous choice is very dangerous because it's a mirage. It's the projection of the desire in my heart out onto the creation, and I try to grasp it, not realizing that it is coming from God, and I can't get it. And so I grab you, and I grab this food, and I grab something else, and it escapes me. And what is happening? I'm crawling into non-being, deeper and deeper, and the more I crawl into it, the more I ache and crave, because I'm getting emptier and emptier. I'm becoming a hungry ghost, a craving. And what's the cure for grasping that which doesn't exist anymore? Because it only exists when we say, thine own, thine own, I offer thee, and all, and for all. So, the mistake we make when we're little toddlers and babies is, God says, I'm yours, do with me whatever you want, and we're too blind and dumb and immature to realize that what we want to do is return it all to Him and receive it back forever. This is the only thing we're trying to learn in our entire life, is to breathe in God and breathe out the love that God is, so that we never lose that life. And it might turn out that after we die, like Brother Joseph, or not Brother Joseph, but Joseph of Vatapedi, when our mouth's hanging open like this, and the monks are thinking, their precious elder doesn't look so good in death. And we take trying to close it, and it falls back open. So the abbot says, leave it alone. Go on and prepare it. So they put the black over him, and after a few hours, when they cut him open, that's what he looks like. Have you ever seen, oh, he's not on there. What's happened here? What happened here? I think I'm talking about something crazy. Let me put him back away from the current slide. You have to see him. Have you ever seen a morticianer fix a face that has that kind of beatific joy on it? There are certain muscles in the face that are not under central nervous system control and cannot be forcefully copied. And that face appeared with the mouth closed. So this man, dead, a few hours later, somebody decided he was allowed to show us something he was seeing on the other side. And there's a lot of joy. All right, we got to go, right?
That's it.
All right.
Thank you so much, Father Deacon, for being with us. We appreciate your time and all of your words. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming so we can do this. Can't have a liturgy without call and response.
Maybe we could all rise and sing Shalom Shalom.
Shine, shine, shine on New Jerusalem, the glory of the Lord has shone on you. Exalt, now exalt, and be glad, O Zion, be radiant.
Oops. Ah. Oh, I'm glad that didn't go very far. Hopefully it stays.